I think I will ask you, those who are not speaking, to wear your masks. Okay? Thank you so much. I will also. So now we start this roundtable discussion from which the title of today's event has come, which is the future of food in Hungary. So we are going to talk about especially the Hungarian context. Of course, it can and it should be placed also in a global context, which is very important. So basically, why food? I will not talk much, but and I won't overcomplicate it. Food is essential for everyone. Access to food is getting more and more tricky. Access to healthy food, which is sustainable from the different angles that we can think about. So we have our guests and speakers in this roundtable with whom we're going to have this discussion. Ágnes Gagyi, Lili, Balogh, and Ágnes Gagyi. They will, I hope, answer my very simple and very open questions in about five minutes each. And I ask you to add the points that you particularly find very important to add. You come from different backgrounds, so I would rely on your different perspectives in delving a little bit into this topic. So my first question would be a very simple one, but it can be a very tricky question. What does sustainable food mean to you? And with answering this, you can also introduce a little bit what you are doing in this area. So I think if we move like this, then that's going to be perfect. So Logan, can you please share what is sustainable food?
So maybe well, that's a difficult question to answer shortly. I'll start more by introducing myself. So my name is Logan. I've been here in Hungary, it's like right about now, the 10-year anniversary perhaps. So I came here 10 years ago as a student. I grew up in the US. I was studying engineering, but really in my own free time, going to the library and reading a lot of books about climate change and alternative economic systems, and then during the daytime learning about engineering and how to build things and how to build roads and bridges and structures. But I knew I didn't want to do this, so I came here to study environmental science, and it was right about the time when I started that program that I realized I was getting a bit tired of thinking about big problems and just learning about them and talking about them in the classroom. So I deliberately planned the second year of my studies so that I did what I had to do in the classroom, but I spent a lot of time outside the classroom meeting people who were actually working on building practical solutions. And it just so happened that I was doing that while I was here in Hungary. I started meeting with farmers, I started meeting with food activists, I started meeting with people who were doing a lot of other small projects in the city, and I still had to I still had to write a thesis, so I decided to write my thesis about local food systems starting and forming in and around Budapest. And I did the thing I had to do. I wrote my 80 pages to finish my thesis, but I luckily spent a lot of time working in food cooperatives, going to farms and working with farmers, meeting people who were trying to rebuild connections between food production and people. And I really liked that experience that I had, and so I thought, when I finished being a student, why shouldn't I just continue with this? Because there's this great community, I enjoy the physical work, I enjoy the physical challenge, I want to keep doing this. So that's what I did. I still have one foot in the university. I teach and do research at Central European University. I'm involved in a number of international research projects, but I'm working mostly on the farm, which is a small-scale organic vegetable farm in the village of Zsámbak, about 1 hour from Budapest. So that's what I'm doing, and in the background I have a number of other projects in the city, in which I'm still working with the same people who I met when I first came here. And since that time, of course, my network has grown and spread out, and it's connected to a lot of other people and a lot of other really interesting projects, and that's why for me I'm still passionate about this work and it still motivates me. And both sides of it are important, the practical side of actually putting your hands in the soil and producing food, but also the more intellectual helicopter observation of what's actually happening. And I'm most interested in blending both of these. And to answer this really big question, which you could write a thesis about, of what is sustainable food, I've just tried to say knowledge and trust are very important to me. It's a gateway towards understanding people more. It's a gateway towards understanding ecosystems and the important impact that agriculture actually has in as a potential solution for slowing down or stopping society's really harmful impacts on the environment and the biophysical systems which allow life to happen. Agriculture is, yes, now in its current form, one of the most destructive forces, but looking through a sustainable viewpoint, it also has some of the most potential to realistically provide regenerative medicine to the destruction which we caused in the last few decades. So without going too deep into it, trust, knowledge, and getting closer to the point of where food is produced is the key gateway steps towards thinking about a sustainable agricultural system, and also understanding a place of food production as an ecosystem, understanding the actual relationship between the living things in soil, the people above soil, the plants that come out of soil. That's the key to start thinking about sustainable agriculture for me.
Thank you again, Lili.
Yes, my personal story is kind of, so hello, I'm Lili. My personal story is a little bit similar. I come from an engineering background as well, but I did agronomical sciences, so basically I was studying agriculture. So I already directly felt during my studies that this conventional system and the dominant global food system is not really the path to do, and there are many problems ongoing. So I was sensitized basically already during my studies to do something different. So once I finished my studies, I started to go and discover different projects internationally, and I from the farmer perspective, but as well from an activist. And this is the path that I took on because I really liked the academia, etc., but I had the feeling that the real work is done on the field. And to understand agriculture, I had the feeling that after 5 years of university, I still didn't know really what agriculture was about. So I wanted to do some research as well, but really more applied. So I became an activist for agroecology and food sovereignty, and basically ever since then I've been following that path, first internationally, but then I moved back to Hungary, and I've been working in that field and being active on that for the past 3 years. Now I'm currently working for an NGO called Védegylet. Some of you might know it's an eco-political green NGO that has been existing for 20 years. It has been ongoing ups and downs, and hopefully now from this down we will go up, but about that later another time. And so about sustainable food, I do agree with what Logan said, and but I would just get a step before it. Like when we talk about sustainability, we, as you said this morning, that we talk about environmental sustainability, economical sustainability, and social sustainability. So environmental sustainability, I guess all of you know about pollution, air, water, soil, health, and noise, etc., and lighting, whatever. And then as well about ecosystem services that agriculture provides, and it's a huge assets that now we are talking more and more about it, but it's a wonderful thing, and we should value all of those components. And as well, sorry, because my mind is going always in different things, so I took some notes, and the diversity, what agriculture represents. So for me, environmental sustainability encompasses those and even more, but let's not go too much into detail. Then about the economic sustainability of agriculture, because it's something that we usually do not mention, but for a farmer who does this for a living, they cannot say, okay, I do everything for environmental sustainability, but I do not make a living. And for the moment, that's the thing, that usually they put always everything above that, and then for their own wages they go down, and which is not sustainable on the long term because they cannot pay themselves a fair wage and their employees as well. So it's a really difficult balance to see. So this is from a producer's point of view, but as well there is from the consumer's point of view to have access to healthy and nutritious food at an affordable price. So for me, this is economic sustainability and the social sustainability as well of empowering communities and giving back the right to choose what type of food they are producing and they are consuming, how they do it, how they organize themselves, and what impact does it have on their health and on their community. But sustainability, basically, I don't know what is the dictionary definition of it, but it means to sustain something. And I think if we want to sustain what is going on now, it's on the wrong path, because we are depleting our soils, we're destroying our communities. So and I'm really glad that Logan has already mentioned the word regenerative, because what we need to speak about is not sustainable agriculture or sustainable food, but regenerative food and regenerative food systems. So systems that are bringing up and regenerating our communities. And have a holistic view, but I think this has been ongoing for the past 2 days. So this is, in my opinion, what sustainable food means.
Thank you. Ágnes?
So I'm Ágnes, I'm a social scientist. I'm also an activist since I was about 19. Back in the early 2000s, in the anti-globalization movement, which was all about trying to stop the processes that led to the catastrophe that we are facing today from even closer. And as you know, we didn't succeed. On the social science part, I was interested in what is actually the power that you can mobilize to act against this bad and the killer tendencies of the system, of the global system. And this, in the classic Marxist terms, this used to be class. But the basic idea was that if the social structure has become such that whatever happens in the economy, which is basically the material base that we live on, they call it the social metabolism. Whatever you eat, whenever you flush down the toilet, you cannot do anything outside this system, and this system is organized in such a way that anything that happens in it only happens because of the profit drive. If it's not profitable, it doesn't happen. It happens because somebody thinks it will be profitable and then there is an investment into it. And this means that, of course, on the other side, there is exploitation. There is exploitation of nature and of humans. And the classic Marxist idea was that those humans who are exploited, who are treated as the source of profitability, sooner or later they are so much hurt that they will object to this. But we know from history that even though there have been objections, the growth and the penetration of the system didn't stop. And I was interested that if I'm here in Eastern Europe, what is actually the structure of this? Is there any power that is social power that is built up through the working of the system that we can work with as activists? So, the classic Marxist understanding of the movement is not only that you are so cool, you have a good idea. You are going to communicate it to others, and then something hopefully will happen. It doesn't happen through communication. Communication might be part of it, but the power that wants to go against the system comes from the working of the system. So I was interested in, what is class power today in Eastern Europe? What is it, the systemically produced anti-systemic force? What is it? Where is it? So I became one of the founding members of this working group for public sociology Védegylet, where it's all sorts of social scientists. We were working together to understand this. So how in Hungary the social structure is part of the the growth of global capitalism since hundreds of years. Whatever social structure we have inside of Hungary, it is built on this. Why do we have huge, how do you call this, land ownership, the latifundial system, which was reproduced even during socialism? Because this is how, in a semi-peripheral, half-subordinated position, it is profitable to produce food within the global system. Why did it that industrialization happened as it happened? What happened through privatization? You know, what kind of businesses there are? What is their structure? How do they connect to the global flow of investment? And within this, what are the types of lives people can live? What is the geographical structure? How Budapest came to be this huge, you know, overly huge center of the country. What is this infrastructure that we have in Budapest? For instance, one of the things we found that the Budapest infrastructure comes from financial speculative investment of a world economic crisis that happened at the end of the 19th century. And you know, this rewrites what you think about development and all these things. So one of the main things that I found was that now, as we are getting closer and closer to systemic collapse, which is going to generate more and more fierce reactions from the elite that is there to protect its power, what is it that we can count on? And this was the organic self-help of people and communities that has always been quite there in Eastern Europe, like elsewhere in global peripheries, where people cannot only live from their wage, they always produce a bit, you know, the whole industrialization, the way it happened, that people went to the city, but in the weekend they went back to do the field and then use that food and all that. And that is happening now. There is a new boom in informal reproductive economy, and I decided that I want to work with this. And that's what this Solidarity Economy Center that we funded with several other people is about. And when I hear these discussions, since my work is all about this really hard strategic question, how to try to do something against a system that is global and is hundreds of years old, and all the power that is there in the world is with the system, how on earth are you going to do anything against it? So when I'm asked this question, how to think about sustainable agriculture, well, the whole structure of agriculture is there, because this is the structure of property and profitability and investment in the global economy today, and then we have the special segment of it in Hungary, the way it works. How you can do anything about that? You cannot just think freely what you would like to have. So this is how I see the question, that there is this horrible system. It is facing a structural crisis. It is becoming more and more evident every half year. And there are all the people who need to survive despite of it. And when it boils down to this kind of, you know, mid-level or short-term strategic question, it looks like this to me, that there are these cracks that are being produced. And our job would be to have a really empirical, connected knowledge of where those cracks are, who are those people, how do we work together, and then all these technical knowledge that people who have been working with counter models have, it would need to be connected into it somehow.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all these interesting insights. And when you answer my second question, please feel free to react to each other if you want to. And my second question would be, would start from the point where Ági stopped, this specific Hungarian context. We already talked a little bit about this, And I would be interested in your views in what are the historical and also current specificities of the Hungarian context. What are the strengths or weaknesses, if there are strengths and weaknesses, that we can work with, work against? So elaborate a little bit on this, please, Logan, and you can start.
Okay. Well, I won't try to tell the Hungarian history of agriculture, but I will say that there is a lot of wonderful publications and shorter and longer documents written about it. I know in Hungarian and English. I know this because I try to write a condensed history of the organic movement from when it started in the late 50s, 60s, 70s as a volunteer movement and what it transitioned into today. And I had to use this when I did my thesis and when I used some publications afterwards. So you can find this if it's out there. I tried to talk a bit more about just what I've experienced kind of participating in small-scale agriculture in the last 8 years or so. And I'll start with the positives, because we could talk about the negatives all day. One of the positives is that we simply talk about the basic tools for agriculture as far as land, geography, climate, water, physical position internationally. Hungary still has the relative basics which you need to have a productive agricultural system which could feed the whole country wholeheartedly and beyond. Water, Hungary is better off than some other countries. The water issue is becoming more challenging, especially even in certain parts of the country where the primary stages of desertification is happening, and of course we see less stable rainfall. It's what most producers are dealing with now, is this imbalance. Changing weather, yes, of course, but the imbalance in weather events such as drought and especially massive rainfall is a big problem which people are dealing with right now. But as far as the basic essentials of agriculture, Hungary is in quite a good position. I would say also agricultural knowledge, there's a high level of agricultural knowledge still retained within a wider part of the population than in other countries, as far as how to produce. Not necessarily sustainable production, but at least the knowledge of production is still there. It is an alarming issue of the rising age of the average agriculturalist, which is getting higher and higher each year, and there's less and less people working in agriculture, which is alarming. So we're still waiting for this next generation of people who are going to be willing to actually practice agriculture and earn a livelihood from it. I will say that also, just from my experiences in actually trying to work in local food communities to produce food organically and try to sell it within this country, there is a slowly developing level of interest in consciousness, or a wider group of people starting to take a bigger interest in searching for the alternatives to conventional supermarket chains or conventional food chains. It hasn't had a big kickstart like it has in some parts of Western Europe, but it is developing here. Unfortunately, it's still largely concentrated in large agglomerations in Budapest or in the other cities. So as far as thinking about how to recreate localized food systems, it's still a bottleneck because agroecological producers, smaller scale organic producers, they're still mostly reliant on cities to actually sell the food within the country. We have to get over this. We have to decentralize this type of conscious demand. Of course, if we want to start thinking about building a food production and distribution system which could serve the whole country, which can come from an agroecological system or organic agricultural system. So there's some of the positives. The negatives, of course, is we can go through, I don't know how many decades we have to go back, but certainly in the last few decades, a destructive agricultural policy, which is partially decided within the country, but enforced upon the country from just the way the global agricultural system works, where each country is pretty much developing and pushing productionist and protectionist agricultural policy. Whether you start within Hungary or whether you go within the European Union, it's a competitive market where the type of agriculture which we're trying to find a solution to was encouraged through policy. What it has meant for the size and scale of farms within Hungary is that you have massive consolidation of farms happening. So you have this relatively smaller number of farms which control and operate most of the land, mostly in industrial, monocultural, agricultural production style. Then in the middle, you have a loss of middle-sized farms, which has even increased in pace in the last 20 years. So there's not a lot of mid-sized farms anymore. Then on the other side of it, you could think of it like well, the bottom gets very big, but you have a lot of people who have very, very small parcels of land, who are mostly the under 10 hectare producers who oftentimes policy doesn't really reach them, or subsidy doesn't reach them, especially if we're talking about the most dominant type of policy, which is a land-based payment policy. So of course, the people who own the massive amounts of land, who are practicing mostly industrialized agriculture, are the ones benefiting from this productionist and protectionist agriculture, which isn't necessarily a Hungarian decision, which is a larger European Union decision. But of course, when the European Union funds come from Brussels and arrive to each different country in Europe, how they're distributed is decided within the country. And if you pay attention to what's happening agriculturally, a lot of the richest people in Hungary, who are mostly these figures we read about in the news, are the biggest landowners as well. So Mészáros Lőrinc and the head of OTP, they're also some of the biggest farmers in the country as well, where they operate the most amounts of land, which is really destructive and has had its impacts on and thinking about the transition of the sector. As I mentioned, there's an aging farming population, so most farm managers are getting closer towards 60, and there's just not an appearance yet of a younger generation of people who proudly say that they want to take on an agricultural lifestyle as a way to earn a livelihood. We were talking about education of young people in the discussion outside, and it may lead them towards a higher level of consciousness of food systems, but in the end, I don't know how many young kids are announcing when they ask them what do you want to be when you grow up, I want to be a farmer, and feeling really good about it. I hope that we get to a point where a young person can say that and really feel good about it, but we have to do a lot to get there, and we have to create opportunities to enter into a quite difficult, challenging market. We have to create new opportunities for people who want to live from agriculture to have jobs, to have an entryway into doing this. And I'll stop there from now. So I don't want to say everything is negative. There still are some positives as well, but a lot of big challenges, which I'm sure we'll talk about more.
Yes, I forgot to mention that I am a farmer as well. I studied my own farm 3 years ago, so indeed I want to become a farmer, full-time farmer, but for the moment financially it's not feasible yet. But anyways, I totally agree with all the things Logan said, and I would as well start maybe from the positive and mix it with the negative all the time, because at least you won't get bored. So if we take the natural landscapes of Hungary and the natural heritages, like seeds and the breeds and local varieties, and the traditional knowledge which is still there, because if we compare it to Western countries, it's more and more eroding and disappearing, while in the Eastern countries it's still there. And as Logan has mentioned, so the types of production and processing, the traditional processes, are still there. It's less and less people are aware of it, but there's as well like a small minority who are starting to revitalizing this knowledge and cherishing it. So I think this is definitely a positive thing. About the water, indeed, we always hear that Hungary is a water lush, abundant country. Unfortunately, if we look at we have more water leaving the country than coming in. So basically, we are a water negative country, which is due to many different reasons. But we should maybe change this whole political agenda and think more about like how can we store water in the upcoming years, because as we have been experiencing for months, it hasn't been raining, and for agriculture it's a crucial thing, water. Not only for agriculture, for the whole life, all systems and all forms of life need water. But so, yes, that's a positive thing, that we have wonderful water, but unfortunately it's negative, so it's a negative loop, and that's it. Then about another positive thing is I believe, and in my experience, there are wonderful initiatives really on different scales and different regions in Hungary, and these are grassroots initiatives. And I think in my opinion, this is wonderful in that sense that it's not like finance from so it's not a top-down approach, but it's a bottom-up initiatives that usually are more sustainable in the sense that they have that passion to keep it on even with low financial incomes, and it's not a project that's keeping them alive. I mean, sometimes of course you can find those, but so they are wonderful. We have been carrying out an agroecology mapping of Hungary, and it was really wonderful to see like that in all regions of Hungary there is something great happening. But now comes the negative, that there's no communication towards these between these initiatives, and there's no political willingness of supporting them. No financial, no legal support, and no political support. So unfortunately, it could be a very positive thing that all around Hungary there could be a really nice network, but unfortunately there's no network, or all the initiatives to connect them have failed. So there is not a strong political presence of these alternative food systems, and unfortunately the dominant Hungarian political model is, as Logan had said, is pushing towards the big monocultures, land concentrations, and big monocultures. I don't know whether you are aware, but Hungary, we might have been better now on the ranking, but the last time I checked, we were the 15th exporter of cereal, global exporter. So you imagine the size of Hungary, and you see that France, Germany, etc. are as well there, and Australia as well. They used to be huge cereal and grain exporters, so wheat and rye, etc. And Hungary is there. Should we be there? Really? Like, is it really our main concern to produce grains for the global market? So I don't answer that. I think you all know the answer for that. And another weakness, I think, which comes in connection with what Logan has said about the aging population and the newcomers. The aging population has a strong lack of willingness of cooperating due to historical reasons, because they have been forced in collectivization, and of course they have this mistrust towards each other, etc., which would be really their strength and their opportunity to join forces together and to network, as I was saying. But because they have these bad memories, and they are right to have it because some of them have been really badly treated and lost a lot, it's really difficult for them to think, okay, but there is a new system, there is an alternative which works differently, and we can create an alternative system. And there are newcomers who are born after the change of regime, and they don't have this set of mind. But as a newcomer to enter the world of agriculture, I can say from my own experience, it's not easy. So, and then again we go back to the political willingness of helping the newcomers or these new alternative systems to be put in place. But for that we need the support of the consumers, but as well, so there has to be a right balance between the bottom-up approaches and the top-down, because both of them needs to move towards the center, which is good.
I would just add a few points on the macroeconomic conditions that are around this. So one of them is what we discussed earlier, that if you have capitalist agriculture, then everything you do with nature within agriculture is defined by the need for profit, which means that everything comes second. So that's why it becomes destructive, and that's why the destruction doesn't stop. Maybe it shifts from one place to another, because once you got back the profit, you have to reinvest it. And then there is the second thing, which is that now there is this global crisis of profitability. These are typical moments in global economic cycles, and in these moments, capital that used to go into real economic investments, it goes to the money markets, which is called financialization. So we have now, since the 80s, building up this huge financialization of the global economy, which means you always hear that there is more money going around on money markets than there is in the real economy. But what happens with all that money in the air? The way it gets redistributed in the money markets are through references to the real economy. And one of the things is the housing market, you know, that is completely financialized and so on, but real estate and agrarian land is the other huge sector where it happens. So, and also, you know, these bursts like the grain market is financialized. And this means that whatever you do in real agriculture, from economic terms, doesn't relate necessarily to what is happening in the real economy in agriculture. It relates to how the financial speculation puts the price on what you're doing. And then within the EU, of course, this comes through limitations and channeling that the EU policy does, which is obligatory to follow for all member states, also for Hungary. And who decides that kind of channeling are basically you know, the biggest corporate interests within the EU, which is Western European corporate interests. So if you are in Hungary and you're trying to do agricultural policy, you are first obliged to do that, which means a lot of things. For instance, that you cannot have small producers sell their milk anymore because they need to do all kinds of tricks that they don't have the capital for, which is a rule that was made so that those people in the West who already had that can sell their stuff and so on. And then there is the third point, which is about, you know, the economic policy of this regime that we have since 2010, which is it does two things. One of the things it does is that it makes these deals with foreign capital, very favorable deals with foreign capital. The major example being the German automotive industry, but we can also think of, you know, Chinese investments into this new railway project, which is going to be paid for by future taxpayers' money. So these are favorable for foreign capital. It has to be favorable because that's why it comes, because it comes when you promise that it can compensate its profitability crisis through investments in Hungary. And you need that because from internal production you are not competitive on the global market. But in other sectors that are typically the non-tradable sectors like banking, telecommunication and so on, and also agriculture, policy has enough power to build out these protected circuits of capital. And this is where national capital, state-backed national capital, has been growing enormously since 2010. And agriculture is one of them. So there is this huge land concentration that happens everywhere on the globe as an effect of financialization. But in Hungary, it happens through this state-backed national capital, and this is the system where it's really hard to, you know, ask the government that, please, can't you just distribute all that land so that we create this climate-friendly, nice, socially sustainable system? And then this is my last point, that you cannot ask them, and this is a key problem of the climate struggle, that whenever public goods like land or water go into private hands, it means that from then on, it will be used according to the profitability need. They won't make any kind of decisions that will decrease profitability. And unfortunately, most of the decisions you need to make in order to make the climate transition are not profitable. And this is why everybody in the climate struggle says that as long as possible, you need to create public property or community property, because after it became private, you cannot say anything about that. It's their business. Like you say that, is this our interest that Hungary is such a big exporter? No, it's Mészáros Lőrinc's interest, and you cannot do anything about it. It's their land.
Hogy csak egy pillanatra való, az központi légbefogó, azt nem lehet az automatika vezérlésszámítógép, tehát az az épület levegő mennyisége. De miért nem ültök be egy terembe?
Vírus helyzet okán. De megoldjuk, mit.
Azért jó, ennyi.
Köszönjük szépen.
Most szívesen.
Don't we want to open the door and then it's going to be warmer? Not too sustainable, but sorry. Thank you so much, and so many aspects have come up, and I think this is the time for me to stop asking my questions, although I have a lot more, and give you also the floor to say something or ask something, and we'll start.
I would like to ask one thing from Ágnes, from anyone. Where do you see a crack in this economic system that we are like the victims of? Or do you see a crack? And probably it's in connection with another question, so I will state that too. And, so do you see, what do you think of Lányi András's lines in several writings of his, that the small circles of freedom can like reach each other as they grow, and we can build a new world from a grassroots movement like thing? And so what's your aspect of it? Because I think that's something I gravitate in everyday life.
If there would be an evident answer, we wouldn't be in this situation, right? But one of the cracks that I see is that since more and more people cannot live from the existing system, or they feel that it doesn't promise anything to them, they start doing something else. And the solidarity economy movement that I'm part of starts to connect them. Like Lili said, that there are many initiatives in agroecology, but if you connect them and they start to build out an ecosystem of their own, they might get stronger. But I think from previous struggles, the lesson is that it's not like you're going to build this huge flowering system within a system that is more powerful than you, and it is your enemy. I mean, you even had the Soviet bloc, right? And it didn't get anywhere. But why I am still motivated to build this is that we cannot be sure that now there has been a global capitalist cycle that looked so good after the Second World War, then it arrived to its crisis, and now there should be, as it used to be, this hegemonic shift, which used to go from the Dutch to the British, then to the US. Now it would be going to China, if we follow the numbers. But below the numbers, there is the complete depletion of the biological basis of the whole thing. So, with this systemic collapse in mind, what do you want to do? Well, you can sit and be sad about it, or you can build these beginnings or these initiatives of ecosystems, and whenever something breaks down, make it possible that this goes into its place. But what people always say to this narrative is that yes, but you are going to be attacked. Like Bolsonaro goes with the military against the landless people's movement, and after a while, it's not like you are allowed to sit in your nice circles if they start to become significant in any way. So, yes, it's hard. But in every crisis, there was this aspect that people started to help each other. And if I'm going to put my energy anywhere, I want to put it there.
I'm very happy that Gagyi is here, because I love hearing really eloquent summaries of the destructive nature of capitalism, whether it's from a Marxist perspective or from a degrowth perspective or from another perspective. It's always really, really compelling and great to hear. And to connect it back to your question, so I mean, I also really focus on this idea of whether it's about the privatization of nature. A main societal problem is that we're still believing in the myth of continuous economic growth, and it's guiding economic policy of almost every country in the world up until now. before the coronavirus broke out, we've reached a point where the criticism of the pursuit of growth was reaching more people than it ever had before. Just the idea of it, but also the people realizing, even in the so-called well-to-do countries, the emptiness within them, which was a product of this exploitative system that they're living in. And we had a massive amount of people looking for an alternative to this, not just happening in the background, but a lot of people writing about it, a lot of people using this as the compelling political point as well. And what also the coronavirus situation has shown was the weakness of the so-called health and wellness system in many of the richest countries in the world. It has put on the backside the environmental, social, political narrative, but it has awakened many more people to how vulnerable they are and how much they've been overlooked or used within our quite exploitative system. And something as simple as a healthcare system which is prepared for the challenges that we will inevitably face in the future during coronavirus, after coronavirus, in the next wave of whatever happens next, that doesn't exist even in some of the wealthiest countries in the world. So what I can only hope is that this doesn't scare the people who are already on the brink of unplugging themselves from an exploitative system into staying within that system, that it pushes them forward. While at the same time we have important social movements happening all around the world throughout this quite complicated time that we have, especially happening now in the US. I hope this only empowers what was already waiting to break out more before the coronavirus started. And if I try to then structure this down into right, how do I approach this each day in my life? How can we approach this? So how is my work, how is my research, how is what I'm doing with my mind and hands each day giving more people an opportunity to unplug themselves from an exploitative system? So how am I creating opportunities for them to live from doing something which isn't based on exploiting nature or people, and doing it in a small way? So I'm not trying to say what I'm doing is the example that everyone should follow, but just to give an example of it. So I'm trying to create new opportunities in the research by pushing forward compelling ideas which help people bring attention to issues which I think are the most important issues. Trying to work on a farm and build a community around it so that that type of alternative farming can actually exist and support people's chances of earning a livelihood from it. So not just struggling to do it, but living from it and living well from it. And then the thought of the types of agriculture which we're going to be trying to promote in the future, so developing training programs so that we can actually teach people what the sustainable agricultural alternative is, so that agroecology stops being largely a term which people talk about to a known practice in different type of agricultural scales, in different type of geographic settings, in different type of agricultural systems. So also in research, what I'm working on with the team now is developing a program for teaching conventional agriculturalists, or those who typically wouldn't be the stakeholder who would be switching towards organic practices or permaculture practices, designing a training program for which can bridge conventional agriculturalists into thinking and adopting more agroecology-inspired practices. So getting back to the main point of using your intellectual work, your physical work to create unplugging mechanisms for people to step out of the system, and using your time as an activist, as a thinker, as a citizen to do this. And it's overwhelming to think, okay, if I ever get to the point where my movement is influential enough, it might be crushed. It might be crushed physically or with violence. But we have to do this, and I see that as kind of the only way to keep your head straight and keep this positivity within you as going on, and it works for me at least.
Can I quickly, and then you can answer. I totally agree with both of you, and I think the cracks are already showing, because 4 years ago, talking about, like, in some circles, of course, it has been going on for 20 or more years about, like, the criticism of capitalism, but now on international high panels to say it out loud that the current economic system is not viable and it's causing many tremendous troubles, and international reports are saying it out. I think this is showing a huge crack, so it's there, and definitely, well, connecting to your second question, that I truly believe, as I was saying, that small communities have a huge responsibility in this transformative change of the system, because as Ági was mentioning, that for a new system to come into place after the first one or the old one collapses, and so we are not like in a total collapse, but it can be rebound. We need these small communities, and they need to, but the problem is that political willingness is doing everything in their power to take away their autonomy, which is a crucial thing to be autonomous and be decisive and have their power, financial, political, etc. So, and that's how it's sustainable. Like if a community can decide and they have connections between each other. But unfortunately, this is not the mainstream trend in Hungary. There are really nice examples and good examples, but we cannot say that this is where it's going.
Can I also say something to that, and then Robbie can ask this question? So, Ági was also mentioning, but Logan was also mentioning that if we manage to go into the cracks and develop our own ecosystems and then make a network out of that, and that's so nice to do and to hear and to consider. If we manage to do that, I think it is very important, and I'm going to be the bad guy here, to be aware that it's going to be faced by massive violence. And fortunately or unfortunately, we already have examples, such examples. Look at Rojava, northern Syria. Their example that they have set is something that we can already learn from in this sense and prepare ourselves, who are not violent people, I believe, how we will give a political and politicized answer to such things, and how we will react to violence, because it is, if it's going to be successful, which is our goal, it will definitely be met by violence. So I think this is also another thing that we keep forgetting, but we should totally have to consider.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I agree that to collapse or violence is inevitable, I think so, but there is another reason that, that why there is still sense of doing something. Is one thing we can learn from colonial history, for example, that the system is not homogeneous. Ideas within the system are actually also clashing. Like the British Indian administration didn't all share the same idea about development. Some of the officers said that, yeah, we really need to give power to the people. Of course, some others said we shouldn't. And the same way, I had some experience with big companies working here in Hungary. And what I felt is that actually many people are green inside the companies. Like many employees are green in thinking. So if they get together, they can actually even have influence on the products that the company is creating. So in that way, if, for example, there is a huge movement like right now, there is this strike, like school strike Fridays movement, this actually has an impact on the people who work in big companies, and they become green. They turn more green, and they have new ideas about the products that the company is creating, and the new products will be more green than they were before. We actually, in my team where I was working, we managed to make a small change in that direction. There were only 3 of us, and I'm sure that in the floor there were like 50 more people, etc. So the system is not homogeneous, and also that's another reason to not give up hope and not just stay passive, waiting for violence.
Anyone else?
What I see is that, so basically, because I always talk from the educational point of view, what I see from that point is, from the education, is that what we have in the class and what we develop is a kind of domination game. So it's like, whether the teacher is stronger or the students are strong. So there is this kind of power game. And this is the point where I believe they learn that whether you kill or you are killed. So this is getting to be worse and worse the more you go ahead with life. So it's like, then it becomes some kind of unconscious system in yourself. You don't even know that you are doing this kind of game, but you learn it there, I believe. So the idea, this is why in the beginning I was like, maybe I won't be a teacher, you know, because I don't want this kind of game, I don't want this kind of, to be this kind of model in this world. But then I started to learn some alternative ways of teaching and some alternative way how to communicate things. So there are many other ways how to basically like encourage or like inspire people by, I don't know, you learn how the students are, you try to like tell the content in a different way, you try to understand them, you try to use other tools. So you try to trigger their thinking. So there are many other ways how you can get the same result rather than using your power as a teacher. I don't know if it's clear what I'm saying. So there are other ways, and from that point, I believe that they will learn in their future how to use these different ways in their lives. And connected to that, I wanted to talk about this thing related to this kind of problem and situation. I believe it's very hard in this system because we are in the system and we learn that we have to take like a very high degree. We have to get good money to do a good job. So we learn that this is how the system works. So this is why we don't want to do other things, or we think that these things are not giving us profit, as we said. That can be the problem as well. But I believe that somehow, like, it's like you trigger this, because I see it in education that what they take, first of all, what they take, you don't see it immediately. Most of the time in the beginning you see this kind of wall that is huge. They probably hate you because you are triggering them, you are trying to stress them, why are you doing this to them? But these things are still filtering. So you are getting into them in a way that you don't expect immediately, like they don't happen there, but they can happen later. So everything that they get is stored somewhere. So, and the second thing is that it's not only about the subject you teach, it's about the role model that you are. And it's very important how much love you put in what you do. Whether you put love in what you teach, you put love towards them, they feel all of this. And this is how I think this kind of system can enter, like in their mind. So it's very difficult that, okay, you tell them, okay, this is the way how you should live your life. Okay, they will not do it. But if you show them how you love this, if you show them how much you care about this, they will feel it. So somehow, I'm not sure that they will become farmers, but maybe they will be more sensitive to this topic and this thing will grow. So this is, I believe, in this kind of manipulative way and not violent or like strong way to teach, somehow they will catch it more. They will, we will have like a different impact, but not like in the direct way, just in different other ways. So this is why I was thinking that it would be great to have like some, for example, projects with the schools that maybe can have some kind of soft credit in their life, like, I don't know, extra credits for something or some certification or some symbolic thing for them to keep. So that maybe they are like, oh, maybe I want to do this because it can also help my education, it can also help my career. And they start to go to places, to talk to farmers, to talk to... So to involve them in some kind of projects, practical projects, where they can really sense the ground and little by little enter this system. I believe this would be a great thing, because they are in this kind of rooms and they don't know what is outside. So I believe it would be great to have this kind of connections with the schools and to try to involve them somehow and give them some little thing as a kind of prize for what they are doing. I don't know, that's just an opinion.
I think you mentioned excellent things and strategies, and I fully agree. Anyone else want to ask or say something to all this? Or anyone would like to react?
Well, I would have a comment on this, because we discussed it also a lot in the first day when I was here, which is about what about knowledge, the place of knowledge in all this, which is the trade of most of us here. And as we also said back then, the problem with knowledge is that it is not built up in a universal way. It is built up according to the structure that there is. I mean, you do education in the educational system because of two reasons. The first main reason is to prepare the proper employees on various levels who can perform the task that is good for those companies. And the other one is to prepare you as a citizen for basic citizen purposes. And if you are someone like a researcher who works in this, there is this nice idea of the autonomy of research, but from our work, all of us know that, you know, it's just an idea. In the real life, it's much more complicated. And when you try to teach something, to do work as a researcher and a professor that is anti-systemic, what is it actually that you are doing? What those students can do, you are preparing them for white-collar jobs. They need the expertise. They're going to have it on their diploma and then work somewhere. If they have anti-systemic ideas in their minds, on what level can it actually have an anti-systemic effect? And this has an aspect that I just wanted to mention very briefly, which is, you know, the class situation is that the fact that we have white-collar jobs is not because there is a universal ahistorical need for smart people to organize everything for stupid people. It is because it is artificially separated manual labor from expert labor for capital and state purposes. And if you want to maintain your white-collar position, even if you are just, even if you think that this is an anti-systemic white-collar position, I am teaching students, train them to be anti-systemic white-collar people. You know, in the structural sense, it doesn't make any sense because this is the structure that upholds the white-collar positions. So when you are thinking of these things that, yeah, you don't want hierarchical knowledge, you want to work together with the producers in producing the knowledge, what is the structural reality of that? And, you know, you hear Logan speaking about his life where it is actually connected. How many of us can actually do that? Are we going to do that? How do you arrive to that thing where the expertise you have can be connected to the material circumstances of your life where you don't depend for your biological needs from a white-collar position? And okay, this was the general thing, but the very small direct input here is that when we speak about research collaborations, what is the actual structural perspective of that? I mean, now we are in a moment where most of higher education and research in Hungary is completely transformed, and it looks like, oh, this is the worst thing that can happen in Europe. It never happens, but actually in Europe and the US and everywhere, academy is completely financialized and subordinated to capital, and most people are precarious and blah, 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 you know all that. So in 2020, when you say you are planning for research collaborations, what does it mean? How does it connect to this, to the reality of what has to be done?
It's a really good question and really good point, and Agnes' summary of the power relationships and the complexity of the challenge is a really important one to bring light to. So I don't want to make the story about myself, but it's kind of the perspective that I know the truest. So I started off mostly having a background knowledge in agriculture, but approaching it mostly as an academic. And since then, this has been warped where I still remember what I learned in academia, but participate in practice mostly. And I also have a lot of contact with people who come to researchers with an interest in an agricultural topic and in their type of approach. And to be honest, the relationship is usually quite exploitative, where what we give back to someone who has a research project, which is probably very interesting, which is probably very valid, is often more of a time and resource-based gift as opposed to what we get back from it. And I'm not being critical to researchers, but we have to think about flipping the relationship and the design of the research away from emphasis just on observation or harvesting information from somebody who has special information which we need, and to more of a participatory or equality-based relationship. And that doesn't necessarily have to be as intimidating as it sounds. But getting involved with something and slowly building up a research team can be very fruitful as well. So not sort of mining your brain for some hot button topic and some hot button area and some hot button stakeholder community, which sounds really exciting and sexy within a research environment, but letting the research come out of you by what you're already doing, or who you're already working with, who you're already involved with. But for this to happen, you have to be physically involved in a community. One of the other challenges is that you probably, to be good at it, have to spend a certain amount of time in a location, which as a researcher, knowing most researchers, to be in one physical location for a significant amount of time is very difficult, especially if you've been trying to live as a student or live as a researcher. But I can really advocate for the benefits of developing a more genuine understanding of the challenges and the people in an area if you embed yourself in a place for a certain amount of time, if you have this privilege to be able to do it, and let the problems or challenges that you want to address in a collaborative research project come out of this. And I think it's easier then to imagine a participatory project where the project is designed within a community and the results are visible and tangible eventually for that community if you're already spending time engaging with the community and a theme comes up and comes out of it. So as a researcher who's concerned about these issues, needing to come up with topics, you don't have to feel overwhelmed of the challenge of embedding yourself in a place. If you're already interacting with people and participating through advocacy with your work or through your life, it will happen that way. And I just want to we're talking about sustainable agriculture. I need to make a point which is really, really important to me, especially to stop talking about agroecology as a concept and start thinking about the practice. Whether a farmer is conventional or whether a farmer is organic, we have a massive instability in the amount of available nutrients to put back in the soil. There is no closed loop agriculture because most of the nutrient inputs which we're putting back on soil to preserve the nutrient quality in soil are coming from industrial agriculture no matter what, because the likelihood that the farm is a mixed farm where they're producing food for people and also housing ruminant animals is nearly non-existent. And so the imbalance, there's a complete, whether you're growing fruits or vegetables, you're mining resources from the field because you're growing products which are taking nutrients out of the soil. And in most cases, whether the farm is big, small, organic or not organic, they're putting them back either with fertilizers or the concentrated remains of industrial agriculture, so concentrated pellets which come from factory farms. And we really need to think seriously about how to encourage a shift towards where farms are producing food for people, fruits and vegetables, but also having animals to produce the nutrients which they need to put back into soil. Even in villages where you have a lot of small farms, people have completely given up to a large extent holding animals as well. So they're either mining their soil of nutrients or perhaps putting it back through pelleted manure or compost pellets or something like that. And me personally, to try to just give one example of a really tangible, practical, interesting rural development and environmentally themed research project, I want to start thinking about a rural development supported project which can make organic composting center in a village, which can give a job to people to just basically work with animals and create good compost which can be distributed in the village. How to make that happen? I don't know. It's probably much easier to get a new sports stadium built in a village in the middle of nowhere than it is one small barn with 10 cows in a field where they can graze and to pay 5 people to work with the animals and make good quality compost. But it's definitely possible, and I think this decentralized core nutrient materials of agriculture, we really need to rethink about this from a practical side. So I just want to provide this as one. If agroecology is going to happen, if food systems are going to change, we need to think about the raw nutrients of production and how to return more nutrients back to the soil in a natural way.
Can I just reflect briefly on what Ági was saying, which was very interesting.
this white collar and reproducing the white collar jobs through research and education. First of all, I think this very slow awakening that I was also mentioning when we were out there of the necessity of combining research and activism, the pure necessity, is something very promising in this regard, or something with potential in this regard. And the other thing is just a funny thing that happened during the workshop. We stayed with a couple of participants in a room and just kept on talking, and it turned out that basically all of us have this idea of giving up our lives and go farming, right? So basically this, I think it is not a coincidence that that a group of researchers have the same idea of the unsustainability of their positions as researchers and as academic people, and having these ideas, exactly those what Aggie and Logan was also mentioning. So I think that was very funny, but it is also very promising, I think, in a way. And then turning it again back into research and again back into doing education, and all these things can at one point maybe have results.
Can I just reflect on what Logan was saying?
I'm afraid that I have to say that this is going to be the
I'm going to be very short and very brief. No, it's just because I totally agree as well with participatory action research, and most often what he was mentioning is definitely true. And after, like, if we take the next step, so after exploiting the farmers to get the knowledge, the problem is that the knowledge usually very rarely goes back. So access to knowledge and that information of the research is very rarely done, that they give a feedback that, okay, so basically the results of the research are this, and this is how you can use it, etc. So that next step is crucial, because otherwise why do we do the research? For the white collars? Or we need to do research which is good for everyone, and especially for those that we are researching, no? So if you're doing research, please think about the next step, that how it can benefit the community that you are researching. That's what I really wanted to say.
That is just an excellent last word, and thank you all very much. I think many very important things have been said. And thank you for coming here, and please do continue this discussion on your own or during we finish those goodies on the table, because we should do that. And in the meantime, we can still talk a little bit informally. And then just a last point, at 2 o'clock we meet those who are interested, those who would like to join us. We meet at the Red Cross's Homeless Shelters Garden, which is managed by Budapest Bike Mafia, a civil organization, and they are doing community gardens in these homeless shelters. They have, I think, 3 in Budapest now, and this is one of those gardens, and we are meeting the organizer there, and she is talking, she's going to talk a little bit about the project itself and the difficulties and how it is going. So that is the last point for today. We can also, those who are interested, we can also go there together. We can decide how we go there. So those who are interested, please stay, and then please let me know if you are interested. Or otherwise, it can also be done individually, of course. But the thing is that by 2 o'clock, we are going to be there at Madridi Street. I can tell you the exact address as well. So thank you, and